Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine that we put together here, COVID-19 or not. I mean, we've seen all sorts of things at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, and we keep plugging along because good public policy is good public policy no matter what mitigating circumstances Chicken Little may run across the TV screen telling you to ignore it. For in that vein, as we get past Thanksgiving and in towards the end of the year and transitions and things like that, one of our best friends is Chris Edwards, Director of Tax Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, and of course the editor of downsizinggovernment.org. Chris, welcome back to Freedom and Prosperity Radio. How are you doing, sir?
I am good. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
As we potentially look back, and given that you've been running, how long has Downsizing Government been a publication of yours online?
Oh, we've had the website up for about a decade now at the Cato Institute. We originally put it up because when Obama came into office, he claimed he was going to go through the federal budget line by line, program by program, and cut out the waste. And so we thought, oh, great, we'll create this website to help the Obama administration cut some of these programs. And, of course, he didn't really cut anything. Then, he added a lot to spending, and then Trump would add a lot more to spending. And so we're in this disastrous debt situation today.
Well, and now we're in COVID-19, where I made the point to, I think it was Congressman Griffith, that you could have made a much more constitutional case for COVID-19 to tell businesses, listen, we're going to have a temporary takings under the Fifth Amendment, temporary, and we will make you whole for whatever business losses you have. We have your IRS files. We see what you do. And then you can keep your employees paid. They can stay home. We can kind of do what we need to do. But we just keep working these kind of crazy little pork-filled funding streams, and then that's still going on, the CARES Act, and they keep talking about new ones on top of that when we haven't spent the whole CARES Act.
Yeah, that's right. So at the Cato Institute, our economists initially thought that it was reasonable to provide emergency aid to business because a lot of these state governors were mandating the close downs in particular. And so through no fault of their own, of course, the millions of businesses got into trouble. So some initial aid was reasonable, but I'm not in favor of any more bailout packages. For one reason, the latest GDP data shows that GDP is soaring now. We are in a V-shaped recovery. Unemployment has plunged a lot faster than the economists thought, months ago. So the economy is rebounding, and so even as the aid has started to run out, the economy has started to boom, which shows you that we don't need government bailouts to get the economy going. We need the government to get out of the way. And one of my fears now is that, the incoming Biden administration is going to throw a wrench in the works of this successful recovery we have so far. One more data point. We have data on startup businesses, and the number of Americans starting businesses has boomed in recent months, which is really heartening to see. So a lot of folks apparently who were thrown out of work are starting businesses. Mm-hmm. A lot of those businesses are online businesses. So this is all good news. I think more bailout packages would undermine it.
Oh, absolutely. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. We see it on the street level, Chris, where, the remarkable creativity of the American mind, it reminds you of where the phrase American exceptionalism came from. It's like figure out what you're good at and go find someplace to do it. And you're never going to feel like you're working a day in your life. Our prosperity came from the fact that we could associate with the people we wanted to work with, doing the things that we wanted to do. We weren't assigned to some task by some centralized planner. And I think the American, ability to overcome COVID-19 even is driven by that. Is that I'm in the business.
Absolutely. Decentralization is the American genius. The people, will always say, oh, well, look, the Chinese or the Europeans, their central plan is, helping them somehow. I don't believe that's true at all. Our economy continues to be on top. Because of the decentralized genius. Look at how we've had multiple different pharma companies now come up with vaccine solutions that look like they're successful. That happened not because there's some central plan. It was because of the individual innovation and genius of these private companies. So let's get the government out of the way, and let's let entrepreneurs start all the new businesses with the new opportunities they see in the online world.
And the online side of it is an interesting sidebar, because I think one of the great debates that's going to rack 2021, Chris, is what do we do with broadband? We hear more government entities talking about, fighting cell phone towers and areas that you could transmit without wires in exchange for government either provided or subsidized broadband service. And I worry about that backdoor and relying on the government to do something. Is there a happy medium? Is there a last mile kind of plan that aside from just the government running lines and connecting you to the internet, broadband wise, we can look for, or are they just going to copy what they did with the phone service and just give people monopoly?
The big thing, of course, looming with telecom is 5G. I hope the government just gets out of the way and deregulates to allow, private businesses to invest. One of the great unheralded success stories of our economy in recent decades is the absolute massive hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in the whole infrastructure of the internet and cell phone service and the like. That I remember a couple decades ago, there was lots of worries with video coming online on the internet. There wasn't going to be enough bandwidth and this sort of stuff. You know what? The private market solved all those problems. Yep. The bandwidth of the internet has massively expanded as new demands have been placed on it. We don't need the government to solve these problems. Private markets solve these problems. And I think moving ahead, with 5G, the government just got to get out of the way and let American companies innovate.
Well, but perhaps if they got out of the way a little bit more, we'd have some more companies to compete with the Chinese companies that want to do all the 5G transmission technology.
Yeah, right. Well, so here's what, we don't want. I worry that governments will fear that China is becoming ahead in certain things, and so they'll try to centrally plan an American solution. That is the wrong way. The way to approach this is to say, we got to make America the absolute best place in the world for businesses to invest and to locate. Whether it's telecom companies or semiconductor companies, any other kind of high-tech companies, we ought to drop those business taxes. We ought to deregulate, other aspects of the business environment, and we ought to make this the best place for businesses to locate. So, businesses from everywhere, from Europe and everywhere, they want to locate here and they want to innovate here. That's the best way to approach foreign competition.
Chris Edwards, Director of Tax Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, editor of downsizinggovernment.org, is on with us this week on Freedom and Prosperity Radio. So let's look at where we're, and I always worry about this because classically the democracies of human history have collapsed under economics. Their population started voting for self-interest. They said, well, if I vote for this person, I'm going to make more money, so I'll vote for this guy. They collapse economically, and then the chaos brings about a strongman dictator. And I don't want that to happen here. We're looking at unprecedented amounts of debt. That President Trump had said, well, it'll all start coming back once the economy turns around. I don't know if that's ever been the case in tax policy. And, it creates a devaluation of the currency, doesn't it?
Here's where we are, where the federal government debt is going through the roof. Next year, our debt is going to hit 100% of our GDP, 100% of the size of our economy. Wow. That'll tie the largest it has ever been in U.S. history over 2 centuries, which it reached at the end of World War II. So we're at peace now, and yet our debt is going to be skyrocketing higher than even it was at the end of World War II. Here's the weird thing about American history. Before the mid-20th century, we have never had any kind of legal rule or constitutional rule for the government to balance its budget. And yet before the mid-20th century, it nearly always did, other than wars. I mean, there's some hard data on this. From 1790 to 1930, the federal government balanced its budget more than two-thirds of the years. But since 1930, we've only balanced the budget 15% of the years. So something has changed here. This culture in Washington has just completely changed. It's the rise of this the Keynesian idea, the deficit spending is somehow good. It's the growth of so-called entitlement programs, which put the budget on autopilot. For whatever the reason, our system is not working like it used to in Washington. There used to be a sense of prudence and responsibility with federal legislators that even though they weren't required to balance the budget, that is generally what they strove for. But that has all gone out the window for some reason, and so we're in this terribly dangerous situation now, where we're going to run into a financial crisis down the road, like many other countries have in the past. Greece did a decade ago, and just to put some hard facts on this that really scares me. Greece, when it ran into its government-caused debt crisis a decade ago, its GDP has shrunk more than 20% in the years after that crisis, and it never recovered. The unemployment rate shot up to 30%. And even before the COVID crisis, after a decade, the unemployment rate in Greece was still 15%. In other words, a debt-caused, a government-caused crash is going to create this long-lasting pain for the American economy and American workers. And this is my fear that we're going to run into a big financial crisis. It's going to take years and years to dig out of it.
Well, Chris, what we see, though, are the panderers who just are seeking the Pyrrhic next election, going out and saying, there's rich guys over there behind the tree. I know there are, and I'm just going to go get the money from them, and it'll all be better. And then I'll make sure you get what you need every month. And it is becoming... I don't know. I see so many young people. I talk to so many young people who get it, who see it, who are frustrated by it. So I have faith that there are some 20-somethings that get this idea. But this faux Robin Hood mythos, where instead of robbing from the government to give back to the overtaxed, we're going to go find the mythical rich guys in the woods and rob from them and give to the poor.
Well, look, I mean, even the Democrats for many decades have been for raising taxes on high earners. But at least in the past, they said the purpose would be to reduce deficits and reduce debt, which would be good for the economy, which is arguably what Clinton did in the 1990s. But these days, if you look at incoming President-elect Biden's agenda, he wants to hike taxes massively on high earners, which would damage the economy, and he's not going to use the money to lower deficits. He's got $5 trillion of new spending he wants to do. He wants to massively expand subsidies for education and housing and many other sorts of things that are properly the responsibility of the states. So they want to do this economically damaging tax hikes so that the government can be even more profligate. It makes absolutely no sense. And I really hope that the Senate stays Republicans and that the Republicans put some restraints on this seemingly profligate incoming administration.
Well, and that's going to be the most important thing, to have a firewall in there in the Senate. And we saw the incredible gains made in the House, I think, while the Democratic Party wasn't looking, while they were so focused on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, they nearly lost control of the House, almost like an Aesop's fable, Chris. But when you look at what they're talking about, some of the debt, for school loans and things like that, does nobody in their party realize that half of the cost of college education has been driven up through the subsidy nation?
Right. No, absolutely. The college loan elimination idea is, I find it kind of just bizarre. From the political left is often worried about fairness, and it seems to me completely unfair to take money from the hard working Americans who didn't benefit from college subsidies, whether they're truck drivers or electricians or many other types of occupations. Those folks would be paying their taxes to eliminate the debt of future lawyers and accountants and other high earning professionals. That makes absolutely no sense to me. So I think that sort of a bailout would be completely unfair.
Well, doesn't it also sort of open them to the litigant that's going to come along and say, "Hey, I paid back my student loan. Where's my bailout?"
Oh, exactly. What about if you had graduated a number of years ago and you had, say, accumulated $50,000 in student debt, and you'd worked hard as a young person in their 20s to pay down that debt over the last few years, and you were really pleased with yourself. You just paid off your last loan this year. You were prudent and frugal. You did the responsible thing. And now you hear that the next person along the line has built up $50,000 in debt, and they're going to get it eliminated. Completely unfair. So I really hope that this idea, does not go forward.
What is the reaction? Have you heard anything? Because, here in our flagship city, Charlottesville, the professorial class has been really quiet. Almost in the same way the medical profession was quiet over the idea of nationalizing their industry, because this bailout almost sounds like nationalizing the higher educational system. And professors are going to see their salaries go into the floor because the student tuitions are supposed to be to pay the professors their salaries, and they're just going to vanish. They can't keep up getting big honorariums.
I suspect there's a couple things going on. One is that one of the problems with the federal government subsidizing so many hundreds of different activities and industries and occupations in the economy today is that everyone's sort of suckling on the government teat, and when you suckle on the government teat, you don't want to criticize other people who are getting the subsidies, because then you worry that maybe they're going to come after your subsidies. So I imagine that's part of the problem. And the other problem is that the latest data shows that college enrollment is way down this fall, and I'm sure college professors are worrying that maybe this may be a bit of a permanent change. If college goes more toward an online model, their jobs may be in jeopardy down the road. So, they can probably see the unfairness with eliminating this debt, but they want to keep their mouths shut because they don't want someone going after their subsidies as well.
Yeah, you could really put the kibosh on online learning if you get your hands in and create that control mechanism of it. We're also seeing smaller colleges booming a lot more, private colleges as well, Chris. What about the hospitals? And the danger I see in this coronavirus situation is the government is teetering, and maybe the Biden administration may do this, on creating a system where they're going to wind up being liable for a lot of medical costs, whether it be in Bernie Sanders' Medicaid for All fever dream or not, where insurance companies are not going to want to cover businesses for COVID-19 liability, so the government's going to have to either subsidize or back that. I mean, there's a debt bomb in the insurance world. I've talked to enough tort lawyers who said that COVID-19 very easily could become the new version of my client slipped on your sidewalk last week, and that the government may be called in to handle that.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, this is something that the Republican Senate they want to tackle, and if there is any new bailout bill, and it's something to look at. I think you're right about that.
What about if there is a new bailout bill? And I think you and I both would like to just kind of bite our nail and hold on, because even Mitch McConnell saying, "Oh, we'll get something done now," and I'm hoping the answer is still no, that they don't. But it seems like
I'm hoping we continue to get good economic news,
right?
And then that convinces more economists, kind of on every side of the spectrum, that we don't need further bailouts, or at least we don't need bailouts or aid that are as big as people thought. And I'll give you an example of this. I mean, you wind the clock back about 8 months, and it appeared initially that state and local governments would be really hammered by the recession and the COVID crisis. But the most recent data shows that actually state and local tax revenues are actually remaining pretty buoyant.
Yeah.
And so there's more of a feeling that, hey, we don't need to aid state and local governments anymore. So, for example, housing prices have been rising across the country, and most of the revenue for local governments, city and county governments, come from property tax revenues. So actually, local governments in general haven't lost money this year. They're actually doing very well because housing prices keep rising. So hopefully we'll continue to get good economic news, and that will dissuade the politicians from blowing even more money we don't have.
What about the urgency of Speaker Pelosi to bail out these cities that, especially cities that have been mismanaged long before there was COVID, and to kind of bury it in the idea of COVID aid for New York City and Los Angeles and San Francisco and places that were deeply crippled with legacy debts of retirement funds that have gone awry and that kind of thing, because that seems to be the hang up in any new legislation, is they all want to bail out these cities.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's true that there are, some selected cities that have self-inflicted wounds. New York City and Manhattan. Most visibly. There's something like a quarter of all restaurants in New York City have closed down permanently. For example, the financial firms are moving out. A fair number of the financial firms are moving to places like Florida and Palm Beach, where there's no income tax. So it's New York's high taxes and the crisis this year have caused these self-inflicted wounds to really sort of manifest, and so those cities have hurt themselves. But I think most cities are actually doing pretty well. And again, you're right. There's a partisan aspect of it. The cities that are doing poorly tend to be the Democratic-run ones on the West Coast and in the Northeast that have been poorly run. So that will, there'll be a regional battle in Congress here in the new year over another bailout package.
Last one for you, Chris, because and I was going to wrap it up, and you just triggered something with me, though. These financial firms moving to Florida and places where there's low or no tax structure on their employees, especially, or their business. Given the internet, given the ability to work remotely and to say, well, you know what, the heck with New York and its big property tax rates and its high rents and everything else, we can still be a Fortune 500 company and base ourselves in someplace like North Carolina or Tennessee or Florida. What do you see the reaction of that being?
I think it's a huge thing. I've seen why, I watch the CNBC and I watch Fox Business, and you see this parade of CEOs on those channels, basically saying their business model has been changed permanently. They're going to allow a lot more of their workers to live, kind of wherever they want, and to do online more online business. I think business travel has permanently changed here. There's a lot less reason for business salesmen and other managers to visit, plants and facilities around the country. They can do a lot more online. Because of this, workers are going to be able to live in places with natural beauty and low taxes and more sun. I think that the northern states in the United States, particularly in the Northeast, they've got to recognize that these changes are going to be permanent. The only way to solve the problem for places like Chicago and New York City is to have leaner government, smaller government, more efficient government, so that they can effectively compete against much better run states like Florida.
Yeah, you really you have to open up the competition, because you think about a city should have the best infrastructure when it comes to internet and things like that. But if that's not the case, what do you have after that? Subway? That's not necessarily a sales pitch.
The statistic that I find stunning is that if you look at the size of state and local government in New York State versus Florida, New York State government, like the state government and all the local governments in New York, are twice as large as in Florida. Twice as large. And you can't tell me that the services provided by New York governments are twice as good at all. In fact, Florida probably has better schools than New York State does. So people in New York particularly have to be asking, why is our government so darn inefficient? they've got to deal with that. They're not doing that under the current governor. I hope New Yorkers in the future really start to consider that, hey, the problem here is their massive overgrown government.
Amen to that. And you keep plugging away at downsizinggovernment.org is the website, cato.org as well. Chris Edwards, Director of Tax Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Coming up next, nobody doesn't like Sarah Lee. She's not moist cake. This is the Director of Communications and External Relations at the Capital Research Center, and dark money and how it is showing where the Pack the Court agenda is going next on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.